Energy breakout session. My name's Molly Willard. I work for Forest Parks and Recreation as the Wood Energy and Forest Products Specialist. And the way that we're running this breakout session is pretty sort of laid back. We're not doing any sort of presentation. We have a panel of folks who are going to talk about different things wood energy related. And then the idea is really to open it up to discussion and glean information from those of you that are here. That we can then use to move forward with this potential initiative. This session is being recorded, so essentially we're going to go back afterwards and sort of take notes and pull information from what you've all shared. I can give a little bit of history about why we're having this breakout session and sort of what this breakout session is about. I would say it all sort of came to fruition when the legislature gave a directive to Forest Parks and Recreation to create a 10-year sort of strategic roadmap, and that was the Forest Future Roadmap. And out of that process came various actions through this 2-year strategic planning process that brought people from industries, organizations, agencies together, came out with these various actions. One of the actions that came out of there was to have a wood center for excellence. And the idea behind that was to really have a center that focused on research, education, outreach, support for the industry around wood energy and heating. And so that's where we're at. We have that sort of action through the roadmap, and now we're looking at, is that something that is needed? And if it is needed, you know, what does that look like? And we're hoping that this session can help give us some feedback about that question. That big overarching question is, should we have the center? What should it do? Maybe where should it be? Who should be a part of it? To sort of get us going on the conversation, we have 4 different panelists who have been involved with wood energy in varying capacities around the state. And so I'm going to have them sort of introduce themselves, what they do, and then I have some guiding questions that can sort of help us as we start to discuss this idea of a center for wood energy. So we'll start with Andy Boutin, and I'll let you guys, we'll just go down the line. You can just introduce.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Andy Boutin. I'm a founder and general manager of a company in Montpelier, Vermont called BERC. And as the name might suggest, our focus, legacy products have been wood pellet heating systems. Started about 15 years ago, manufacturing a Scandinavian design wood pellet burner system that was a retrofit, and phased those out about 10 years ago now. And we've been working exclusively with Austrian boiler manufacturers and now German boiler manufacturers, importing fully automated wood pellet boiler systems, bulk wood pellet storage systems for automated wood heat. We recently got into the wood chip world as well, and are now working with a company called Heisomat out of Germany, bringing in wood chip boilers that are kind of represent best-in-class quality for emissions control. Every system has an ESP system on it. They just obtained ASME certification, so really kind of excited about that product line. In years past, I have run and operated a wood pellet mill as well, so I've been on kind of the fiber end of things, the manufacturing end, and currently am serving in a consultant and advisory capacity to the Rygate power plant, trying to get their efficiency upgrades implemented with the potential of a wood pellet mill on that operation as well, using waste heat from that to dry fiber, make wood pellets, and also kind of looking at the whole biochar arena as well, combined heat and power. So that's just kind of my background and how I fit into the energy sector here.
Hi, I'm Rachel Mascolino. My employer is BEIC, and I'm a consulting engineer. My background is in HVAC and facilities engineering, and My day-to-day work with the wood industry is really on the demand side. So I work with the customers who are looking to transition from fossil fuel heating systems over to advanced wood heating, pellets or chips. And I do a lot of education and advocacy. So I work with municipalities and school boards and help them understand the feasibility of what that would look like. I work with commercial customers as well. I also do a lot of support for facilities managers who are operating buildings that already have advanced wood heating systems or biomass systems in them. Sometimes they can feel a little siloed and isolated in their operation, and we want to make sure that they feel supported to continue operating those systems and not resort back to fossil fuels. And I do advocacy to help make sure that the incentive dollars that come from the state of Vermont through Efficiency Vermont, that there's a significant portion of those that stay to support advanced wood heating systems. And I do that through helping to bring some visibility to the importance of how advanced wood heating plays into the energy goals for the state.
Chris Heine, I work at the Public Service Department where I'm the Clean Energy Program Specialist. I'm working on a number of different kind of renewable and clean energy programs currently. I also work with the Clean Energy Development Fund, which offers incentives and at this point, mostly for wood heating systems, both residential and commercial. They've been for a long time providing incentives for renewables across the board, but as those funds have kind of dried up, wood heat has become the focus of the Clean Energy Development Fund. Programs that I work on for the department itself include the School Heating Assistance with Renewables Efficiency Program, which is a really long name to have a clever acronym for the SHARE program. And also working with some other funding for renewables more broadly with municipalities, including wood heating systems.
And my name is Adam Sherman. I am a managing consultant with BEIC, and I've had the pleasure of working with all the folks here on the panel over the last 20 years. I got into the wood energy sector when I was hired in 2004 by the Biomass Energy Resource Center. That was an entity that was its own private nonprofit organization of 501c3. And then in 2012, that organization was acquired by VEIC, my current employer. And so I continued to operate that program under the header or the umbrella of VEIC. I work all over the country and helping communities and organizations and state governments look at the opportunity of using local renewable resources and using it as a way to build community wealth and displace fossil fuels and lower greenhouse gas emissions. And wood heating is a big piece of that. So yeah, I guess that model of the Biomass Energy Resource Center is kind of one of the reasons I was asked to sit on this panel. I'll talk more about that in a moment.
Yeah, and so a few things that we have sort of, maybe I should explain to you more about the history through what, their bios were. Is one, there used to be a Biomass Energy Resource Center, which was called BERC, and that was at VEIC, right, Adam?
Well, originally it was its own.
Its
separate
own
entity.
thing, and then got absorbed into VEIC.
Correct, yeah.
And that was funded and did probably a lot of the things of what we're talking about this, Excellence for Wood Center could potentially do. The other thing is just to understand where Vermont sits in terms of how we really lead the nation in wood energy, and like 1 in 3 of our kids go to schools schools that have advanced wood heating systems. In the past, we had a memorandum of understanding with Upper Austria that Adam was a part of. And so when we look at Vermont for the nation, we're really leading a lot of what is happening in Europe and other places that are more advanced with advanced wood heating initiatives. And so that's part of the reason we really see where maybe having this center could be beneficial. It also, is a market for utilizing our low-grade wood to support our forest products industry and sector. And so the more we can have, obviously, it's like we were talking about this morning, there's, declining markets for accessing where you can send low-grade wood. And so the more we can expand those markets also helps support the industry as a whole. It also, a lot of what Rachel and Adam work on, as soon as you put in an advanced wood heating system, we're decarbonizing from fossil fuels as well. And so it's an immediate decarbonization. So that's a helpful thing too. So I have some guiding questions to help us as a group think about this idea of a wood center, and would it be beneficial? One of the things, so the first questions are really like general wood center questions. So looking back at BERC, what was the most important contribution that BERC offered, and who is now filling that niche? And so I think, Adam, maybe you'd want to tell us what did BERC do, and maybe if others feel like maybe you were engaged with BERC, and or if you feel like that niche is being filled now.
Yeah, so BERC started out in 2001, and it was funded by and large throughout the years through Senator Leahy earmarks. So it came through Department of Energy. Department of Energy at the federal level was just throwing tons of money at liquid biofuels, second, third generation cellulosic ethanol development. And so we saw a need for kind of off-the-shelf commercialized technology that could directly displace fossil fuels, save communities money, and have all these benefits. And it was like sitting there ready to go and need to pump billions into this technology development. And it was just advanced wood heating. And so we had this legacy of using wood chips in Vermont for heating schools and more colleges and hospitals. And so we were an entity that was trying to catalyze the market growth and potential of implementing more of these systems here in Vermont, and using Vermont as a learning laboratory of like how it could be done on a microcosm scale, but also scaling this up and working with the U.S. Forest Service in Montana and Arizona and Nevada, all these places where they have real need to thin forest to reduce forest fire, and had an entity, the U.S. Forest Service, who was willing to pay good money to help develop the market and develop the supply chains to see this market and this model take off and grow. So we provided a range of services, from kind of technical feasibility assessment to kind of program design and implementation, looking at and advising state agencies on how they could use limited grant funds to get the biggest bang for their buck. And so it really straddled the policy, regulatory, programmatic, and technical aspects. And basically the reason that the Biomass Energy Resource Center ended was it just really wasn't feasible outside of the subsidy of the earmark funding that we received. But that was its function and purpose. And I think in hindsight, looking back with 2020 vision, in many ways we were successful and played a vital role in catalyzing this market. So, today, here we are, we have colleges, hospitals, town offices, from the residential build out of the automated pellet market that Andy's been vital in, all the way up to, district heating plants the size of the Montpelier project in partnership with the state of Vermont. So, I think we're very proud of that history, and we see a vital opportunity for continuing that in the future.
And so I think to ask sort of like a specific question, it could be like, if a Center for Excellence in Wood Energy were to be developed, what would that center and the mission and the purpose of that center be? And I think if we could hear, so Adam, you kind of gave us a background, but given your sort of experience and where you guys come from, Chris, Rachel, and Andy, if you want to say what you think that center would be, and then it would be nice to get some of your feedback too from the people that are here.
Yeah, I think from the department standpoint, wood is a good resource for kind of grid impacts, ratepayer impacts, especially as we start electrifying more and more, you know, reducing kind of the load on the grid. Wood is a great way to do that. Certainly, as we see winters, the grid itself is dirtiest at that point of the year. Renewables, certainly solar that has been, kind of an all-in, kind of renewable resource that, everybody is going for, it's not around as much in the winter. So, how do we kind of relieve constraints on the grid, during that time of year, when we're heating with electricity more and more? Wood's another great way to do that. So I think, this center could be a great way to kind of change the story on wood itself as a resource. I think there's a lot of negativity around wood, and a lot of interest in renewables that are great, but maybe aren't the all-in solution that some people are making it out to be.
I think from the building end user operator standpoint, I think the gap that I've seen and the question of like where, now that BERC is gone, where is this information coming from? And I think we're lucky that we're a small state and a lot of that information kind of transfers organically, but I know that Adam and I just get a lot of random calls just because people know we work in this industry, and there's people who are desperately looking for that resource and that information. And I think there's a need to set that up formally so that it's sustained. And we've been lucky thus far in putting a lot of pressure on Efficiency Vermont to pick up where the CEDF has left off with their incentives, but as the order of appointment from the state to Efficiency Vermont changes, like that's not guaranteed. And so we've kind of made that work to fill some of that gap, but none of us have the sphere of influence or are at the pay grade to make sure that that sustains beyond, Adam and I working for VEIC. So I think from the customers that I speak to, that's kind of the gap that I'm filling. And I think there should be more that's pushed out there as opposed to just people making random calls from names they've heard of people who understand this technology.
In terms of a need, maybe you could just paint the framework of like how many buildings in Vermont, and I think you have an interesting perspective on like how wood heat plays a unique role in the customer needs and where electrification isn't always the.
Yeah, so as municipalities are often have a mandate to, if they have a heating system in a building die, they have to investigate a renewable option to replace that. And I think there's been a lot of good marketing around heat pumps. And so a lot of people think like, oh, my boiler died, I'm just gonna put a heat pump in. But when you have a 60,000 square foot high mass school that's heated by steam radiators, there's no heat pump in the world that you're gonna pull that system out and make that school comfortable. It's like you better invest in a lot of down jackets for all those staff if that's how you're gonna make that work. And so there's this, everyone wants an easy button, and I get that, right? Like decarbonization is tricky and it's nuanced, and I feel like I'm constantly the maybe slightly negative voice of reason that comes in and is like, that's not gonna work, right? Like, and unfortunately I've played that role, but I'm comfortable with it. And so making sure that like, no, heat pumps are not gonna work. But right now, schools have the opportunity, when their boilers are approaching end of life, to make a decision once every 40 years that's gonna be able to decarbonize that fossil fuel. If you don't put in an advanced wood heating boiler right now, you've got 40 more years of burning oil. And so that's kind of maybe the perspective that Adam was alluding to.
I would echo that. I think our from a wood heat perspective, our largest issue in getting more impact in the communities, and it's just overall knowledge of the systems. We've started, as a company, we've started to attend, very small business group gatherings regionally, and just giving a little talk saying, hey, we're from Pelergy, this is what we do. And it's probably not an exaggeration to say 90% of the people in the room have no idea that you can heat your whole home or your whole small business or school with wood pellets and or wood chips in an automated sense, meaning it's largely hands off. Yes, it's a little more work, but yes, you have these, and it's surprising to those of us who have been in the industry for 15 or 20 years. It's surprising to those who have invested in the systems and own them, because it seems like, well, of course I knew this was available, but really being a center for the promotion of the systems, and not necessarily advertising promotion, but just from an education standpoint. Like, here's what's available, here's why it's a good thing, here are all the resources that we can provide to get it there. As a company, in the last few years, we've also taken on heat pumps, because we've kind of seen this happen throughout Europe with our partners as well. Every one of our partners in Europe has a heat pump line, and so we figured we've always been on the back of the renewables bus anyway, so why not try to get a few rows forward and join this heat pump deal. And it's been quite a struggle, because we come at things from a perspective that we want to replace an entire heating system, and provide a replacement heating system that can cover all of your heating needs all year long at existing comfort levels. And in doing that with heat pumps, we're presented with massive challenges. We've done it a half a dozen times in the last 18 months, and I mean, to the tune of probably twice the amount of money that it would have been to put in a pellet boiler, for example. And there's a lot of intricacy involved in that. And I think that those are the types, when you get into these systems and you get into these levels of discussions, it really takes someone like Adam and Rachel to dissect this for the average individual, because you're getting into all this nuance of low temperature versus high temperature distribution systems, high mass buildings, and immediately, people kind of glaze over. And even if we've had people just come to us and say, I do not want any combustion in my home, I want to electrify everything. And we've had one customer waiting 18 months to get their service upgraded, from the power company. So there's all these other avenues and approaches, but I think education is a huge piece, not just from an awareness perspective that this is a potential, but also how this really fits into the different homes, different businesses, different envelopes that we want to heat.
And before I pause and bring it out to the folks that are here, Chris, do you want to just elaborate a little bit on what Andy said in terms of so there, and Rachel, the huge surge of heat pumps, but what that really means for our grid system?
Yeah, so we're on a very interconnected grid. We have very little energy kind of production going on in the state of Vermont. So we're reliant on all sorts of resources throughout New England to make sure that our grid works. As the winter gets colder and colder, natural gas goes offline to create energy or electricity, and instead goes to heat for all of the pipeline connected folks down in southern New England. So when that happens, you start seeing more oil come online, more coal come online, and as that gets dirtier and dirtier, that's really what's powering your clean heat pump. And so there is a little bit of a disconnect. That's not what heat pump advocates are really kind of telling potential customers. It is something to think about, and I think we're waiting for a lot of offshore wind to come online, which will help clean that up a little bit. But for right now, that's not happening at the pace that we need to see it happen for clean energy to really be powering these heat pumps that we want to see, clean the grid up, so.
You want me to jump in there?
Yeah, one element that needs to be considered is as those temperatures go up, the grid is getting dirtier, but also the performance of that heat pump is going down. It needs more electricity to maintain set temperatures. So it is a kind of a vicious cycle. I think one of the unique values that I want to leave with you all is that we talk about battery storage to balance out the grid, and the rate in which we can deploy battery storage to achieve this grid optimization, the scale of that is huge, and we don't have the batteries to do that right now. So the tiny increment that wood heat can play, a ton of pellets or a cord of wood in your house, a cord of wood stored there, that has the energy storage equivalent. One cord of wood, 312 Gen 2 Tesla Powerwalls. One cord of wood, there's your battery. So, I think it has.
We sell that for the cost of the Tesla.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's an interesting aspect of how we're trying to integrate and optimize.
That's an interesting fact that I didn't know. That's a good one.
I actually attribute
We
that
have
to
it.
Emma Hansen.
Yeah, great.
Until I stole that.
So 312 charges and discharges of that Tesla battery, if you have one in your basement, that's a year's worth of.
And they're apples and oranges.
I think it's also important not to have an adversarial relationship with heat pumps. Right? Because a lot of times, like in this industry, we fall into this category. And quite frankly, it's why we embraced it as a company and said, look, we're going to go down this route. Now, we decided to go down a route that was air to water based or ground source based, which is either geothermal or air to water, meaning the mini split you see on the wall here is, we have no interest in these things. This is, these in our mind are an appliance. They're not a central heating system. They can do great things for homeowners, and homeowners who have them. I put a mini split in my own house. I get it. Like air conditioning in the summer. I grew up in Vermont, never had air conditioning before. Having air conditioning is wonderful. I love giving my money to the electric company in the summer that I never gave them before. It's fantastic. But that's also the key to why they're being promoted so well. You now have a year-round energy consumption. The electric grids, electric utilities are one of the only businesses in the world who everyone tries to use less of their product, right? Over and over again. Even the companies themselves are incentivizing, for the customer to use less. And yet, here comes a product that you're going to use more, and you're going to use more year-round. You're going to use more in seasons where you never used it before. But with our changing environment, again, love air conditioning. But we've kind of pivoted to air to water systems, and I think looking at hydronics in terms of what we can do with wood heat as well, and marrying these technologies together is really, what excited us about it. Because now we're moving water through a distribution system in homes and businesses, either chilled water or warm water, and you can either heat that water with wood energy, you can heat it with your heat pump, you can heat it with a geothermal source. We're also working, with some district energy systems where we're having a centralized wood pellet boiler in new development, and we're heating 20 plus homes off of BTU metering. Taking that to the next level and adding in geothermal or heat pumps in those shoulder seasons, is like the penultimate for us, where you have low temperature distribution. So I don't want to paint this picture of us and them and, one renewable over another, but really give that educational piece that wood heat is really a part of the mix and needs to be part of the mix and is viable, because so many times we see people just say, gosh, I would love to do this. I'm told heat pumps can't heat my house, so I'm just going to put another oil boiler in, or I'm just going to put another propane boiler in. And I think they've kind of missed the mark because of the education piece.
Okay, so I think we're gonna pause there. So that's sort of some general information about wood energy, advanced wood heating systems, where they're at, what's happening with them. I just want to hear from people, and I'm seeing people here who are part of cogeneration projects, larger electrical biomass plants. We've got people here from lots of different places. So in general, if people want to share a little bit, like this concept of having a center for excellence around wood energy, do you feel it's a good concept? And if so, what would be you could list a few components that center would provide to help support advanced wood heating? Yeah.
Al Roberts, Vermont Woodlands Association, and also the town of Sheffield in Vermont. And Adam, you and I had a conversation several years ago about the BERC plant and the Eckley plant in Germany. I think the idea of a center is an incredible idea. What I see here is expertise that singly, individually, didn't have the clout when we testified in front of the legislature to make the permitting for combined heat and power plants possible in the state, which right now it's almost impossible. If we had that center and we had that expertise showing up at the legislature, I think that would be the kind of credibility that the legislature needs to see to understand and think about doing the things that need to happen to make this happen. We've got MES boilers in Sheffield School. We're speccing those in our new facilities. There's a MERC program of $80 million worth of this stuff coming down the pipeline, and I'm just wondering if they're talking to you guys about making sure that those are the kind of boilers that are going in all over the municipalities. That's a lot of money. It could be a lot of different things, but this is such an incredible idea that could happen if we had that center.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. A couple things with the MERC program, and Chris, you might want to expand on this. We did sort of reach out to that program so that we're trying to make sure that advanced wood heating systems are a part of that funding that's going to go out for municipalities. Yep.
Yeah.
Would you add anything to that?
Not much. It didn't seem like it had been something they had really done a whole lot of consideration
No.
about. And I think they're also, $80 million is a lot for that office to move, and I think they're struggling with it, unfortunately.
They're struggling big time. We've had talking with them a lot, and they haven't even come up with the application forms yet for the implementation plan.
And they don't have much time to get that money moving, unfortunately, so we'll see. Hopefully that'll.
Can you give it the full name? That sounds like an acronym.
It is.
Energy something.
Resource something.
Yeah.
It's for municipality facilities.
MERP?
MERP, yeah.
And you first have to do level 2 facility investigations of all your town offices and garages to find out how bad they are. And the second part of that program is if they're really bad, or if they're just now we're salvaging, there is a way for you to replace facilities to that fund. But they are not far enough along yet to even tell you what the rules of engagement are. It's a great program, it's just not there yet.
Rachel, do you want to share anything on MERP? Because you've probably worked on a few projects or.
I've been called by some of those facilities who have received those audits and then said, now what do I do?
Brian Sewell?
What's that?
Brian Sewell?
No?
He's the chair, he's running the program.
Okay, so I was getting calls more from the actual like municipalities and town
Yeah,
offices who had received the reports, and they get this report, and then their question is, what do I do with this information? And that's where, Molly has brought me into a couple of projects where we've looked at, here's this audit, and looking at, then piecing together the feasibility of heat pumps versus advanced wood heating, taking into account ventilation, thermal shelves, so just the whole engineering picture of how this is gonna look. But I've not seen anything kind of go to,
No, they're not there yet.
okay, well, that's why then, yeah.
Yeah, the R stands for resilience, by the way, that just came to mind. And the other issue here is certainly the municipalities' ability to kind of manage their own projects and put forward good,
Complicated.
so.
Municipalities get left behind quite frequently. We've dealt with 3 or 4 of them now where we've come into town garages, for example, and it was just nothing for them to be purchasing 10, 12, 15,000 gallons of oil per year to heat their garage. and to say, look, we can put you in a wood pellet system, and you know, not only will you save nearly 50% on your costs, but you're offsetting all this fuel usage, and in large part, they just don't know. Or it's just a budgetary line item. And of course, the oil truck's gonna come and deliver oil every single year, and they don't even think about efficiencies in these places. It's not part of their job, right? We've got potholes. You know, it's not in the purview. But I like another thing that you said regarding advocacy at the legislative level. And, you know, that's something we've struggled with for years. We've, as advanced wood heat folks, we've really, you know, we've tried over and over again to kind of partner with Renewable Energy Vermont, but we're not a well-funded industry at all. We basically have zero funding stream. So this is probably one of the largest issues with wood energy and wood heat. Every other renewable sector has a massive funding stream that is effectively based in taxation, right? And we all have an efficiency charge on our electric bill. You know, we have a New England coalition that taxes electricity and pumps it into, you know, organizations like VEIC, who does their best to kind of prop up our wood energy sector. But we have no funding vehicle like that. The solar industry has benefited massively from that. The wind industry has benefited massively. The wood energy industry, it's been all organic. It's had to come from us. So here we are, the smallest little sector of this renewable industry, trying to build, you know, folks like myself, trying to build businesses over, you know, 15, 20 years, scraping together every bit of financing we can. And, you know, we consider ourselves a success story. We've got, you know, 5 employees now, you know, but you take a company like, you know, Suncommon, who started as a research project, you know, in BERC and an offshoot, and now they're, you know, multi-million-dollar venture capital funded organization. We don't see that level of funding. So really anything we can do to organically have that voice with policymakers, with legislators, but I think that what I've learned over the years is that starts with the citizen. It starts with the homeowner. You know, it would be great to say, we need all this, you know, we need all these people knocking on the doors of legislators. We need people testifying in committees. And I've kind of come to the realization that's unrealistic. We need to educate people from the ground up. You know, we are where solar was in the 1970s, and we've remained there for every bit as long as I've been in this industry.
All right, Andy, I'm gonna move over, so Ed, and then did you?
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was on the Forest Futures Roadmap, Strategic Roadmap panel or steering committee, or whatever it was. I remember when we created this action piece, I kind of thought, is it a reality? Is it really going to happen? So I'm thanking you, Molly, for taking the initiative to bring together a panel. And I like what I'm hearing. As a lobbyist for 30 years, I remember back in the 90s, the Capitol bill had $30 to $50 million every year for schools to put in wood heat systems. And I got to think, that's 30 years now. They're going to have to upgrade.
They're all
So I've been planting the seed, as a lobbyist, I've been planting the seed in the institutions committees to think about, you know, they're all going to be coming back for upgrades. You may want to start looking at 20, 30, 40, maybe 60 million a year going forward in that. Of course, their eyes glaze over when you talk that kind of money. But I like what I'm hearing, but you're talking to the choir here. I'm interested in how you would respond to those antis that we're dealing with. And as a lobbyist, I'm dealing with it every day. So, you know, that's the thing. What is our message? And should a good message come from the center? I think that's key, is to help us with the facts. We're getting a lot of misinformation about biomass, about wood heat. We're pretty environmentally friendly. We're operating sustainably out there in the forest. We're doing a lot of good things, but that message doesn't seem to rise above all the lies we're hearing from the antis. So I would want to seek a lot of data in a nice, easy to understand way, and educating people, but ready to step up to the antis as well.
And so I'll address that, we'll jump to that sort of next, but I want to give anyone else who wanted to share something just about the concept of a center for wood energy and maybe what it would do, yeah.
So, just in my experience, I've lived in spaces all my life that are heated with wood, but I think it needs to start at a residential level to kind of echo your sentiments. I think it really does start with the citizens. So the reason that people have grasped heat pumps is because there was this big push, right? Like they were sold on a residential level in a massive way. Citizens were out doing audits. I was one of them, and for free, and saying, hey, you should get a heat pump, you should pair it with solar. And that was how people were educated, and the benefit of that too is that they feel like wood heat requires a lot of labor, right? So you think of wood, you think of having to stack a quarter wood every year, and as we have an aging demographic, that becomes less realistic, and they say, oh, I can have a heat pump and it's so easy, and I can just press the button and it's really nice. So I think that a center for excellence in wood energy would be lovely to have, mostly as an educational piece, but campaigning on the residential level, because, when it gets to the point where a municipal board, who is all just citizens, or it's a school board who's deciding how to build a new school, those are all people who are coming from experience of their own home, that had to put a system in their own home, and they say, oh, this is a great idea, why don't we do that, So I think that's sort of the approach that I would love for this subject to take.
Okay.
I had a question, curious from the BEIC perspective, and you're working at multiple different venues, the concept of working on a more regional basis as opposed to just Vermont focus. As a regional funder, having funded education campaigns around food and heat, that's much more appealing than Vermont focus. As I mentioned, the market for businesses is better to be thinking about a more regional basis, but I'm curious, given this is coming from a roadmap specific to Vermont and with different policymakers and departments focused on Vermont, where that tension is with that, I think we're looking more broadly than just. Are you asking my opinion on whether it should be Vermont focused? Or feasibility to look broader, I think for this to work and have real impact, it would have to be regional at a minimum. Echoing some of the comments that were made by the panel in the plenary session, straddling lines across Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and even into upper New York. We have similar winters, we have a similar wood resource. Our building stock is pretty similar. The need is there, and the market is, growing in those other states too. They're trying to deploy that in Maine and New Hampshire, less in New York, but I think in general for it to scale up and have the impact, and businesses like Andy's, I assume you don't just do business in Vermont.
No,
Regional markets, both in terms of wood flow and where the installers and businesses are operating in, it transcends boundaries. So I think the origin and the emphasis can be on Vermont as the epicenter and use that kind of learning lab and then replicate model that we've used in the past. But regional is in my opinion, just my opinion, is vital.
Yeah, and I can just add on that a little bit. The idea of I think having the center in Vermont and why it was thought to be potentially a good location and place is because we've sort of led the nation in the region, but we are seeing our regional state partners really looking to us to help them with their advanced wood heating initiatives. So like say over the last 3 years, we've even hosted a tour for Maryland folks who come up to look at our systems, and what we're doing is they really work to implement the initiatives they're looking at in their state.
Yeah, I would just echo what this gentleman just brought up in kind of discussion right now. It's jumping on exactly what Ed Larson brought up. So I'm dated around with the professional lighting contractors, but for the last 4 years, I was on the kind of steering committee for the Feel Good Heat campaign of the Northern Forest Center, and that funding is dried up. And so we're kind of now left with nothing. So if the center were to be in Vermont, great, but it has to be regional, because the heat pump situation is real across all the states. And I think there's economies of scale. You know, Maine has a thermal rec, Massachusetts has a thermal rec, New Hampshire has a thermal rec, Vermont needs a thermal rec, New York. And you have to bring about policies that are ubiquitous across state lines. But at the end of the day, to what Ed's point was, we need data, we need case stories, we need economic stories, so that, and that has to be consistent day after day after day, or we're just gonna continue to swim upstream, talk to ourselves, and we will bite along the edges like we have been, but we're not gonna make any major inroads. So I would definitely say, make it regional. If you want to do it out of Vermont, fantastic.
Any other, Christine?
I had a question about, I don't know if this was touched on earlier, but in terms of, one of the aspects of a center like this, would technology transfer, could you see that being useful? And Andy, I'm looking at you because I know you do a lot of work with partners over in Europe, and like bringing technology that's prevalent there, here is kind of what you're all about, but like what kind of support could be utilized? Like, is there support needed for that? Is there opportunity there that some sort of a center being an epicenter where those technologies are either being, coming in and people can come and figure out how to deploy them, and or testing newer technologies that are coming down the pike? Like, does that seem like it could be part of this?
Yeah, it's interesting for me because we work globally, right? We're pulling technologies mostly from Northern Europe. And we work throughout all of North America. I've got systems from Alaska to Maryland, Michigan, all over, the North American continent. And I think one of the challenges we have is that we're way far behind on the technology scale. I mentioned we tried to manufacture our own systems for a number of years and just could not keep up with the technology advances that Europe is making, mostly because of the market penetration. You can look at all the reasons why, and most of them are funding. Just recently, again, 75% of an advanced wood heat system in Austria, Germany, France is paid for by the government. When you put in an oil or a fossil fuel-based heating system, you actually pay more for that system from a tax perspective. You also pay more on your property tax. You also pay about double what we pay here for your fuel oil. So there's a lot of policy involved from a technology standpoint. One of the things that we run against over and over again is that our partners will generate the next latest and greatest. And typically, it's a cleaner burning device, it's a higher efficiency device, it's more automated, it's less hands-on, yet I can't bring it into the United States because I'm hindered by these archaic rules of the EPA, or we don't have the support at A&R, air quality, to be able to look at a report from a European test lab that says this thing's burning as clean as a propane boiler, right? And like, wow, sure, you want to tell me that because you have a financial benefit by bringing the system in and promoting it. So from a technology standpoint, it's almost like we're in this category of being so far behind from the technology perspective that, again, it's that education piece, it's that advocacy piece with both policy and enforcement. I mean, we bring our systems over that are tested in Europe to the highest efficiency standards that are recognized amongst dozens and dozens of countries for particulate emissions, and we bring it, and they're the best of class technology, the highest efficiency. We test the EPA standards, and they're abysmal. It's like
Wood boiler looks better.
Yeah, an outdoor wood boiler, manufactured in Upper Wisconsin looks better than these incredibly engineered, highly efficient systems that are, modulating. And so it's just we're so far off base technology wise that I can't I can't even comprehend how we overcome it. this would be a great first step. But it's almost like you've got to have a PhD on staff who's, nonpartisan and not affiliated with any type of industry, not getting any industry money. And I'm not sure how that happens, because people come to the table with a preconceived notion, as Ed mentioned earlier, the naysayers. We could talk all day long about all of the advantages of wood energy. But if you're walking through the door as, a Standing Trees or a 350.org or, burn nothing mentality, nothing we say or do is going to change your mind.
Okay, Andy, I'm gonna stop you there so that we get, yeah.
Me?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, if, going off the kind of regional discussion and the citizen education piece, I think having resources or education that is for renters, is important. I don't know what the percentage of Vermont population are renting. I imagine it's bigger in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Anecdotally, from my experience around here, renters tend to be living in very substandard housing and are paying the price for that. Obviously, it probably doesn't make sense to put in a wood heating system for a house that just isn't insulated or something, or living in newer construction that is slowly coming online in Vermont. But I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding around what that is, and I think renters don't know how to advocate for themselves with their landlords, and landlords have no idea what they can and can't do in terms of wood heat.
Other general thoughts, Dave?
I just wanted to mention the fact, and I think we're all thinking about it, the fact that the benefits of having low-grade markets for wood is part of the driver that keeps our forests working for us, and so that people can afford to have forest land and not develop it, which keeps the whole system propped up. And as part of an education center or a center that has education, that needs to be driven home daily, just like the other things.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that people don't understand. They think, oh, we're burning trees, and I'd rather let them stand. Well, that's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
I think that, I would say that's
huge.
probably the most important. Absolutely, the most important. And that's where I think we have to cross, we need the forest industry, we need the recreation industry, we need, it's no mistake that, Molly's position is in forest and rec, right? Those things go together, but it's completely lost on 90% of the people, completely.
There's one other hand, and then and then we'll go to Evan, and then I'll go to the next question. Okay.
Knowing that there's a proposed tax on fuel oil, does any of those funds transition into promote wood?
I'm not sure how I'm not sure how those funds are going to be allocated.
Got the wrong guy from the Public Service Department for this.
Had to touch the third round.
I think this is, take this with a large fistful of salt. I think there is going to be room in the clean heat standard for wood to be incentivized or receive credits for that whole future that we're looking at. I don't know, maybe you
I
guys.
serve on the committee that's looking at that under the purview of the PUC, I guess. And wood's being included in the quantification of the carbon benefit that, ultimately payments and incentives will be prorated to the carbon benefit. I don't think there's a general slush fund being discussed to fund advocacy. It's just here's some money towards pellet systems and here's some money towards heat pumps.
Yeah, receiving money doesn't do you any good unless you have the education to choose that.
Agreed. Yeah. I don't think it's currently on the table, but it's a great point.
I'm gonna give you my pessimistic answer, that we'll end up where we have for the last 20 years. The decisions will be made, we'll look at it and go, why didn't they consider the fact that this is a 30-year product? as opposed to a 10-year product? Why didn't they consider the fact that, it's local economy, not coming out of Asia, not, why didn't they consider the fact, and we'll sit back and go, this is crazy, yet again. Oh, and every refrigerant sold today and for the next 2 years won't be available in the next 5 years, and when these things fail, the refrigerant goes up, into the atmosphere, and is thousands of times worse than CO2, but we don't have that voice, and we don't have that funding, so that's.
So the center that could be, and so like, I think that's a common theme, I'm pulling it out. It could potentially, a little bit like what BERC did, bring the people together. And potentially, there would have to be funding to start such a thing, but start to give a voice to some of these points that are being brought up. Evan, let's.
Yeah, the clean heat standard was just brought up, and that was something I was going to mention. And what I was going to say is, I think when you look at some other states that have made use of TREC programs, for example, and you look at the value that it could potentially present the user of the system, I think that there's an opportunity to build upon that. And I think that education is really important. And what I was going to say is that I think that when you look at the state from like an 80-20 rule, and you have all these people who are pretty much disengaged because they never really had an interest, maybe a new incentive might present some opportunity. The other thing I was going to mention is cost. I think that while the cost of the system may be, of course, something to discuss, I think looking at the cost of the fuel is really important as well. And I think when you compare the cost of wood to the cost of electricity, in particular, and also just maybe what someone is already using the fuel with, I think there's a huge advantage to focus on.
In the essence of time, because I think we have until 11:45, so that gives us 15 minutes. I do kind of want to jump to a couple questions that I think are important for us to hear from you all about, and those are, because I think what generally everybody here is in support of a center that would promote and help build this out. But in doing that, who are key players that should be involved in the center? Where should a location of it be? Where would you put such a center to assure that it's not meeting the needs of one sort of institution or the goals of one, sort of agency, but really touching on all the points that you all are bringing, and having sort of that broad support. So I think that's, and also being poised in a position to be able to work with the legislature and policymakers and not be held to some sort of maybe potentially organizations or agencies' mission. So that's a big question, I think, to throw out there.
That's a no-brainer. Montpelier.
Put it in Mount. So anyways, let's go around and see what people have to say about that a little bit, yeah.
I think that, so I've just been saying from the beginning that I think that the whole forest products industry needs like a whole new marketing campaign. And I think it starts with the young people. I mean, sustainability is the buzzword, and people just grab onto it, right? So it needs to be in a place where there are young people and where the young people meet the forest, and recreation is a huge part of that, as you mentioned. So I think that if you can poise it in a position where people who can make the link between the forest industry, sustainability, using energy in a way that is sustainable, having it linked to the forest, and then bring the loggers and the actual people who are doing the work into it. I think everybody would just benefit from that, because nobody sees, everybody thinks, oh, they're cutting a tree and they're doing something bad, right? I mean, I went to, environmental schools, and that's how we all thought, it works. But now I'm married to a logger, and that's not how I think anymore, and I get it, And I think people just need to, make that link, and it needs to start with the younger demographic, but then also homeowners, people who are in the woods, all of that. So, I don't know where that magical place is.
Yeah.
Next to Ben and Jerry's. Alpha. Waterbury, right next to Ben and Jerry's.
Right.
Close to Montpelier.
I would like to propose that, think of it less as a physical, like this is an office or this is an entity, more of, yes, there's an office that does it, but the center produces educational outreach. So to your point, Maybe there's a permanent exhibit at the Echo Center, and at the Fairbanks Museum, and at the one down in White River Junction, Hanover, the Montshire Museum. And the Wood Energy, Center for Excellence can have these rotating exhibits. You can put signage up at trailheads, on very populated trails to say, hey, this forest is supported but through, forestry and wood energy. I think that there's, thinking in terms of things in this kind of post-COVID era of we have to have a manned facility and an infrastructure and a building. I think that maybe thinking outside of that and in terms of more, maybe it's a mobile, an RV type thing that goes to the state fairs and regionally, where the technology is on display. Yes, there's going to be individuals. Yes, there's going to be, funding streams in office. But I think having those types of things would really go far. And I think we can draw lessons from that in the, the farm to table, the food sector, and some of the other sectors as well, where you have these kind of mobile and movable educational features.
Let me just throw a wrench in that a little bit about would there be reason for a research capacity as well, where if Vermont we're going to have a center for excellence like that, where you had the capacity and the wherewithal between engineers, PhD people, to do actual research too. Just something to think about, yeah.
Is there potential, right now, we're talking of it being located in state government, or?
No.
Okay, it
No.
would not be, okay. I was gonna say,
No, and
that-
prior, I guess what we could say is where it was in the past was BERC, and how we explained it. That's kind of what that was a little bit. Though I would say, Adam, and correct me if I'm wrong, BERC did more with education outreach, and you were kind of partnering with that memorandum of understanding around our research, where we were getting our research information from.
Yeah, so a couple quick thoughts. And the first one on just the need for research and being a place-based laboratory. The center can actually work collaboratively with the national labs, Oregon National Labs, Brookhaven National Labs. So there's ways to kind of tap into the brain trust out there, but to infuse the need and help secure funding for those labs to do the research necessary to change the standards to address some of the points that Andy was bringing up, EPA and bringing this product over. So it doesn't necessarily have to be housed within the center. It can be a relationship-based approach. BERC, we were just an office. It was in Montpelier, but it didn't need to be in Montpelier. So there wasn't a open to the public aspect when our offices were in Montpelier. Most people walked down State Street and never knew we were there, but our activities and engagement out in the world, that's where we had our impact. So I would emphasize the point that it's kind of conceptual and less physical.
Steve, I saw Steve, and then we'll go to John.
Maybe location would be one of the buildings at BTC. Randolph Lawn is a great central location, close to the Andrew, close to the Adirondacks, Quebec, all of that. And I think they're probably looking for tenants.
John?
Jonathan Wood, private consulting forester. I'm just gonna throw a counter argument out there and thought that, what we're talking about is kind of the Vermont way, which is you create some sort of entity that's funded through taxes or earmarks or something that focuses all these things on advocacy and research. And how about putting a lot of that energy possibly into the existing market systems, and these things live or die on their own? Come up with a product that works, that makes sense, that supports the forest, that is economical, and let that process work. It's worked in the past. A lot of what's happened in our schools and our systems has happened through simply the private process, quietly working without a whole lot outside subsidy, creating a new entity. It seems like a lot of energy would go into that entity maintenance, and I really don't think it's gonna work in Montpelier based on it's that advocacy, it's not working. We have outside experts coming in now to the legislature. They're not listening to the private uneducated folks are being listened to. Let's just let the market system work on this. Make a good product, sell it to people, show that it works, make it economical, which it is, and work on that.
And that would be sound reasoning if every other technology and every other wasn't so heavily subsidized. And so we're in a market space that does not benefit from, the oil and gas subsidies, that does not benefit from the electrification taxation on every single individual, that does not benefit from, funding of entire organizations that are focused around electrical and electrifying. So I think that I agree, and I agree fundamentally, but it's not apples to apples. I mean, we're in a sector that does not benefit from any types of those subsidies now. And so what we're talking about is how do you equal that playing field? How do you even begin to equalize that playing field for that market to work?
Can I go to them and then do Rachel and just one?
Yeah, I'm just need a little bit of clarification. If we don't have the funding to do any kind of advertisement or a public, outreach, how do you get funding for a research center? Because I'm actually more on board with both these guys, Andy and I'm not sure. Jonathan were saying, where you really need to get the message out, not build a center.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you build a center, who knows to go there?
Right, and a lot of what people are saying is around messaging and outreach.
And, coupling, to either existing labs or universities, like what Maine was talking about in the past session, that seems like you're gonna get a lot further ahead, because you have free, university students that need their PhD are willing to do this research. And so tap into those resources, versus, I love the idea of a facility, but you gotta man it.
Yeah. Rachel and Adam, did you want to?
I just wanted to comment on the fact that it's not working, right? Like that market-based approach of people, that natural selection of people making a choice of a product that works and is economical. I see choices made every single day that will last for 40 years in facilities that are gonna cost taxpayers more money, they're gonna be higher maintenance and be significantly more detrimental to the environment, and are sending 85% of the cost of the operating of that equipment out of our region and 50% of it out of our country. So if we leave it to the masses on something that's so complicated and engineering-based and nuances, they're not making the right decision. They're not making the market-based decision that benefits them personally or their wallets. And so.
Why? Why are they doing that?
Because they're on autopilot.
Education.
Because you have people operating buildings and making decisions doing their absolute best, and they are making decisions in a silo without outside influence, and nobody's checking those decisions. So you have a facilities manager who's 65 years old, who's been a facilities manager for 40 years, and his whole life he was brought up on here's how you operate an oil boiler. That facilities manager is making a recommendation to the superintendent to say this unit is end of life, we need another one of those, because that's what he knows.
Right.
And who's checking him?
Nobody. The school board? No.
Well,
It's sometimes, but sometimes not.
and it can
right?
even go to the next level. He calls up 3 or 4 plumbing and heating companies and says, I need a bid for a replacement boiler. And because of that market penetration, I'll give you this oil boiler, that oil boiler, or this oil boiler.
They sold, yeah.
And all of that infrastructure is a place. You take one widget out, you put the next widget in. It's the same thing for residential customers, right? Unless there's a catalyst to disrupt that cycle of perpetuating what we have in our existing buildings, that idea of people are gonna make educated decisions that are gonna benefit them in the future, it's not happening.
And that's where I can say, that's where we've made progress in the schools, like in the beginning when I was saying 1 in 3 students goes to a school with a wood heat. That's because we have subsidized that.
Yeah.
Right.
We've done a good job at.
90%.
What's that?
So in the peak of that program, the school construction aid program, we were offering 90% of the cost of that wood chip system. So our legacy of success has not been market driven.
No.
It's been subsidized.
Subsidized, so those were all subsidized, and we're still doing our due diligence there holding those programs, getting that funding and subsidizing the municipalities and now also businesses with that. And BEIC and Efficiency Vermont has some subsidies out there as well, but they're not high enough to offset the cost of what these systems cost in comparison to, you know, a fossil fuel system. Jonathan, I was just gonna
follow up on that. I get it. I understand the realities there, but the landscape has changed. People are on the sustainability scale. And if they just do their homework, rather than people trying to shove it down their throats, which is what you're talking about, it's all good stuff.
But the sustainability committees are not running buildings.
I mean, they're trying to, right?
I think that's evolving pretty fast. I think people are starting to get it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Think about the whole thing this morning. It's private equity doing the right thing.
Yeah, let's go, Mike. Yeah.
What we need is another crisis.
Yeah.
Another one?
1970s.
Are we in one right now?
I could heat my house for $200 for 20 cents a gallon oil. It jumped to 45 cents. Panic.
Yes.
What do we do? Oh, well, maybe we can burn wood. Well, where are we gonna get the wood? Well, I worked for Forest and Parks for 30 years, so I was state land forest. Well, we have state forest. Well, we'll go in there and we used to cut, have these 5-cord lots. We'd mark in there along the forest roads. Very successful, very successful. Then we ran out of roadside roads, so we had to build roads to get in and back of it, and that got kind of expensive. And then it went to, well, eventually ended up with truckloads of logs. Because that was easier. Because people, you know, they buy a little mini Mac chainsaw, they work for about half an hour and they had it. But what happened was people, all of a sudden, we didn't get a wood stove. There were no wood stoves. All the welding companies in the whole state were taking these old wood stoves, they find out in the woods, and redoing them. And that was a big thing back then. That was before Hearthstone or any of the other ones. That put them in business. That created that wood stove, put them in business. And, but that's the only reason that. Also, it started in Forest and Parks, it started the energy, your job, with the original, I think it was Norm Hudson or somebody back then. But that's what started the energy in the Forest and Parks Department. So that was the beginning. And it's still going, it's still, you'll have a third wheel in line to.
Do you have a particular crisis in mind?
Kelsey, I was gonna jump to you and then, yeah, we're pretty much over time, but.
My name's Kelsey Seeker. I help lead the Feel Good Heat Marketing campaign facilitated by the Northern Forest Center. And I can say that having run a campaign targeting consumers and residential homeowners, that the thing that we really rely on, in addition to key messages and looking at keeping forests as forests, is data. That people, in order to talk about heat pumps, in order to talk about the cost and the impact of, yes, if 90% of the schools receive, or I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong, but in terms of like that 90% of the projects were subsidized in some way, well, now if there's subsidies no longer exist, what still makes that worthwhile? What is the environmental impact? What is the local impact? And continue to talk about the money that stays in the region. Those types of analysis and data, I think will be important. It's something that we rely on from our state partners to utilize to continue to market out towards consumers and other people.
Yeah, and that takes time and resources to get that data and do those sort of projects. And then hopefully, even though I hear what you're saying, Jonathan, maybe the legislature isn't taking that information, but that is the kind of information that then helps to drive policy too. Yeah.
In terms of regional center, I just want to acknowledge that the Northern Forest Center has been a key partner over the years and has played a key role. So, in the recreating some sort of center, in terms of our partners and, key players, the question you were asking earlier. I would just acknowledge that Northern Forest Center would be one of those entities, and we can't, ignore that. Not just because Kelsey's in the room, but like, they have helped push this on a regional level for the last, decade and a half on this wood heating, and we've worked closely with them.
I was gonna say, it sounds like maybe people are getting tripped up with the term center, like it makes it sound like
Yeah.
it's gonna be this like thing that is gonna take like lots of extra funds and like extra initiative, and it's gonna be a physical place. So maybe start, and I think this is what I'm hearing from you folks, is that it would be is like a collaboration between like what is already happening at the Northern Forest Center, at BIC, at UVM, UNH, UMaine, leveraging some of those resources that are there, also knowing that like they're not operating just like for free. So they're like, and making it so that there is, when people go to do their homework, and the idea is not that we're just like, shoving information out, but that when people go to do their homework, there is information out there. So it sounds like, yeah.
One way I look at it is, we have all these mission organizations and associations and entities where wood heat is like, it's part of their mission, but it's kind of tangential. We need the center of this Venn diagram where we can bring all these partners together, but someone whose core mission is to not, lose sight and take their eye off the ball and move this concept forward, because there are so many aligning and overlapping organizations, but it's kind of tangential, so we all get focused on what we're really trying to do, which may or may not on any given day include wood heat. So I guess to me, that feels like the glue of what a center could be.
So, given, Christine said we were supposed to stop at 11:45, we're a little over. Does anyone have any like sort of last burning comments or something that they just want to leave us with and get on record for the notes out of this session?
Did you guys, I know I'm kind of speaking into an echo chamber, but I used to live in Wisconsin, and it was really hard to find anything for, as you were saying, a residential homeowner to just have wood fire. But like the only thing I found that was pellets that would kind of plug and play into ductwork would be MES, I guess. But have you guys thought about just how to get that out there better? Because like I looked all the time, over and over. The only thing I could find was just wood stove.
Oh yeah.
That we've always had
Yep.
for years. And then new construction isn't as big of a thing out here, but have you talked to like architects or, these other home builders that unfortunately sometimes throw up cookie cutter houses, but maybe instead of them being all bad, there'd be a little bit of good?
Yeah, no, I think it does start with that homeowner, because even if you're building a house, it's the homeowner that's usually driving, the process with the builder. No, absolutely, and I think it is, one is our, as an industry, our presence. Like through the Northern Forest Center, we tried to get this larger, footprint and presence through the Feel Good Heat campaign, and it's still like I've got 1,000 different search engines for renewable heating, and then our results that our marketers have compiled for us. I was just looking through it. The search for pellet boilers or pellet furnace is down over the past 18 months by over 800%. The search for heat pumps is up over 9,000%. So it's really, we're not even in the same kind of category as far as like individual awareness. And so I hear your point. It's really hard to get that traction as a small entity, in the big ecosystem of the internet and social media. I think that the Northern Forest Center's program has been one of the most successful at it, but as they'll tell you, that took tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars as well. And so I think that, to Adam's point, kind of bringing all these different entities together that may be a piece of what they do into something can have a louder voice.
Well, I'm interested in the next step. And,
Yeah.
and make sure my association I work for is included in that.
Yeah, so this will be a part of, you know, the whole roadmap process that we've been working on. So this, you know, as we start to work towards the implementation of the roadmap, and part of that is reporting out on how our efforts are moving forward with those actions, that will be out there.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
it's time to transition.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your input.
Thank you.